Hey everybody, welcome back again today for our next session in realistic fiction writing. So this is realistic fiction writing session 2. We're going to spend some more time today just talking about how writers come up with ideas and think about ways they can come up with creative stories in realistic fiction writing. So just to reflect on the last couple of days what you guys worked on, we talked about how you can get story ideas from your own experiences in life and strong memories that you have, like things that you actually went through in life, and use those to create a character in the story. So remember, we're not writing a story about ourselves. We're creating a character in the story based on things that happened in our own life. We also spent time talking about how those characters in that story, while they're not about the actual truth, they are realistic, and you could see those things happening in real life as you move forward. So we're here today to talk about how that is not the only way, right, that authors come up with ideas. And one of the ways that's super popular for authors is they get a lot of ideas by thinking about stories they would want to read about themselves. I don't mean read stories that are written about them. I mean, but they'd like to read about those stories themselves. And they would like to take time and think about what they'd like to actually read about written by another author. So not something like that happened in my own life, but oh, I could relate to a story that was written about certain things. And so authors think about those kinds of ideas and they say, oh, if I would like to read this story like that, somebody else probably would too. And I could use that as a story. So I'm going to give a few examples. The first list I made of real life experiences, but turned into stories, were the following things. I said, moving to a new school in 5th grade really happened to me. I think I could write a story about someone moving to a new school. Spending time with my grandpa growing up was really important to me, and I could probably write a story about a person's relationship with a grandparent or with a parent. I said winning the sectional championship in high school baseball was a big deal. I could use that as kind of a sports story, realistic fiction sports story. And then I said I dropped my lunch tray in the middle of the cafeteria, and that was the one I kind of rolled with when I said I could really create a story about like a clumsy 4th grade student who has to try to figure out how to avoid embarrassment throughout their everyday life. So these next ones, I'm going to pull down just a few really quick ones. We'll go into more detail about some later, but these are stories that like I would like to be written, but I didn't go through personally, right? So a teacher is trying to teach virtual learning. I am kind of going through that right now, but I wouldn't be basing it on my own experiences. I'd like to read one that was made up about a teacher trying to do that, since it's something I'm kind of going through right now. I think it'd be interesting to read a story about that and kind of relate it to my own experience. I love to read a story about someone who has to find a lost dog. That's something that I think we've gone through. A lot of people go through losing a pet or think about losing a pet, and they could relate to that and understand how the character feels, and it'd be a good story. I also put someone who moves away to a new city and has to make new friends. Like, we may not have gone through that. Some of us probably have gone through it, and just being able to read a story like that and learn from that person's experience in the story may be something we like to read and relate to ourselves moving forward. Now, these are not necessarily things that I've had happen to me personally, but I'm saying I would like for someone else to write a story about that and then read it, right? I'm not basing it on my own story. So stop and think for a minute about what types of realistic fiction stories you personally would like to read. So remember, the stories have to be realistic. So I may love to read fantasy, but that's not helpful for me to create ideas about realistic fiction. So like things that you've had happen in your life, or things that you could see happening in your life that you'd like to learn from, or listen to a story about someone else who had a similar experience, those are the kind of things we want you to stop and think of, right? What can I write about that would be something I would want to read, but is realistic fiction? So I did sit down and come up with some stories, ideas that I would love. So I have one: as a friend is caught in an argument between two of his pals. I think we've all been in situations, right, where we have two friends that they're mad at each other, and we're kind of in the middle of it because I'm still friends with this person and I'm still friends with that person. So how do we figure that out and fix it? That'd be a really interesting story for some of us to read. I put: a student cheats on a test and feels guilty about it. I know I've had students do that before. I also know that's a common thing that some people may go through, is they feel guilt about something and they want to try to make up for that and fix it. And that could be an interesting story to read. I did put: a family has their dog run away and has to find him. That's one I talked about earlier. That's a tough situation for people, and it'd be cool to see how a character reacts in that situation in a story. I said the main character discovers a hidden talent and uses it to help others. So a lot of times as we're growing up, we don't know we're really good at something until we find out one day that we are actually really awesome. And then it's cool to use that talent and kind of help other people. I'd love to read a story about that. And the last one I said, friends have to come up with a way to pass the time on a rainy day, because sometimes kids can be really creative, and a story about how they like, I love to do indoor recess stuff. So I think it'd be cool to read a story where kids maybe come up with something fun to do on a rainy day and then apply that on my own, like even though it's from a story, in my classroom. So your job over the next couple of days is going to be to think about, okay, what's a story I would like to read? And how can I plan my own story using what I would like to read? What are some of those stories I've read before that I enjoyed? So you could even put those down on your list, like, oh, this is a realistic fiction story I've read before. I'm not writing the same version of it, right? So maybe you really enjoy reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid. That's a realistic fiction story. Greg is a realistic character in the book. You're not going to write another Diary of a Wimpy Kid book, but maybe you could make another character who goes through some kind of similar situations to Greg, right? We're not writing another Diary of a Wimpy Kid book. That's what we call, well, if you copy them, it's called plagiarism, and you probably get accused of stealing ideas if you're using the same character and same things. But just what would I like to read, and how can I use that to come up with some story ideas? So your job is just like on Tuesday and Wednesday, you had those 2 days to come up and submitted by Wednesday. You're going to have today and Friday to come up with ideas in your writing notebook. And then on Friday, you're going to post a second set of story ideas based on what you would want to read yourself, not what you've experienced in life, but things you'd want to read. Then you're going to combine those two lists. Like, oh, I have these 4 ideas from my first time. I have these 4 ideas this next time, and choose 3 that you think are your favorite. Like, I could really see myself writing a story about these 3. So on Friday, you're going to come on and you're going to submit, here's my complete list. This is all the ideas I came up with, and here are my 3 favorites. That's going to be your job on Friday. Today, all I want you to do is watch through the lesson. You can start writing down some ideas in your notebook. It's not a bad idea to go ahead and get ahead, but you're not going to actually submit those ideas until tomorrow afternoon. All right. So take some time. Make sure you go back and watch this again tomorrow if it's going to be helpful to you. And we can't wait to see some of the ideas you guys come up with. Good luck. We'll talk to you later.